Good morning, good morning. Coming to you today is a marvelous, marvelous opportunity for us to talk about this very, very hot summer. Lots of fireworks both in the garden and in the skies. I know there'll be some tomato conversation today, so let's get started. Good morning, Lance.
Good morning. I think something might have just happened on our screen, but we'll work out some details. How's it going down there this morning?
Well, it's beautiful. It's absolutely a lovely, lovely day. I have to say that this is one of those times of year when you can feel the air as you open the door. It sort of grabs onto your arms.
Yeah, well, it's been pretty muggy around these parts. I don't know about you in there, but a little light breeze of 3 to 5 miles an hour, it doesn't do a lot. You got to have the big fan out there and make sure that the animals are getting some breeze. But we hadn't had the huge thunderstorms other than one or two that we had for like every day. So I think everybody's probably on a watering schedule now.
I think so. This is when you have to really look around your neighborhood, because there's going to be somebody that does not have a rain shutoff on their irrigation system. And so in areas where the lawn already has plenty of water, for example, you might want to encourage them to put in the valve that will keep it from coming on when it's actually raining outside, or when it has what it does is to measure the soil moisture and turn on the sprinkler when it needs it, as opposed to every day at 2 o'clock or whatever, however you might have set it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't think about those things until one of the lines breaks. Then all of a sudden there's a gusher in the backyard and you realize that you should have been paying more attention to the irrigation system. They can be wonderful, but they can also be a lot of trouble if you don't take care of them. Like so many things,
Well, the world is busy for summer, and we just had the big 4th of July. I don't know if y'all had tons of explosions going off all night.
My ears are still ringing.
Ears are still ringing. Yeah, the animals were having a big time. A neighborhood did a great job with a lot of the big stuff and got up in the sky. And so it was nice. I could just kind of sit in the backyard and enjoy it. And it's kind of hard to beat a little fireworks display that you don't have to pay for.
Exactly. That's pretty easy. Today at SuperTalk.tv, you will see the newest plant that I have acquired, which is an old plant, but I just didn't happen to have one. Y'all know I love the clerodendron family. Even though cashmere bouquet is one of those plants that will run through your yard and be an extreme bully at times, even though glory bower is one of those things that smells great for a day and then kind of doesn't, it's still a wonderful, wonderful family. And this particular one that you'll see today is white flowers with red centers. It's called clerodendron bleeding heart, and I think it's one of the prettiest. It climbs, but it's not aggressive, and it's just a plant that if you have a space for it, I think everybody ought to have one hanging either in a hanging pot or in a container with a small trellis in it. It's a beautiful, beautiful plant. One of the things that I'm most fond of in that family. Just hadn't had one in a long time. There's so much going on. I don't know if anybody else but me will want to celebrate, but today is Mechanical Pencil Day.
I love a mechanical pencil now.
I just love mechanical pencils. Yes. There's people out there going, I better get another cup of coffee. Now they're going to talk about pencils.
Well, the yellow one that looks like a pencil is the only one I ever really like to use. The number
fun.
2,
Sure.
and you spin the little head on it. Buy them in like a 6-pack. I love those things.
Keep those things.
When you do math, for so long, you just sit there scribbling stuff down, and you get used to not using pens.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. When you're learning to take notes, and you realize that you can't cross out everything as you misspell it, you get to a mechanical pencil pretty quickly, especially with a clipboard and things like taking down data and doing stuff in research. I did not know. I knew there had to be something before, because obviously there was graphite, and people had I've seen little clips that you would hold the graphite with in order to write, the predecessor to the mechanical pencil. But there was also this other thing that were propelling pencils, because they invented a device that allowed the next step, and it allowed the lead to be shot out of the pencil so you could use it. Now, obviously, we don't think of mechanical pencils as propelling pencils because we hit them and put it out there. But it was just a really funny notion to me. Somebody was so obsessed with this. And this is really what it takes to refine anything. We don't get to glow-in-the-dark petunias overnight. We don't get to mechanical pencils overnight. We have to have several steps in between here and there.
Well, we have a phone call right out of the gate here, and it is Mike in Greenville, and he has a question about daylilies for you, Garden Mama.
Wonderful. Good morning, Mike. Thanks for calling today. What's on your mind?
Good morning on such a hot Saturday morning.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to clean out some beds. I've got some large daylily beds. Can I mow the daylilies down? Will they come back, or do I need to just clean around them?
String trimming would be better, because we don't want to scalp them. As long as you leave the center, as long as you're leaving their clump in the center, they will be able to grow back. But you can also just dig them all up if you prefer to do that. But I wouldn't use a mower unless you have a better mower than I have for that sort of task. If you mow straight over them, it's got to be set real high, and you don't want to scalp the center of the clumps. Does that make sense?
So if I mow them, I got to mow them high.
Very high, yes. I've seen
Okay,
it done.
I
I've seen it
appreciate your
done. I've seen it done, but I can also tell you that I have seen it done badly. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done not so well. So just don't get too low. Don't let the clumps get scraped all the way down to the ground, because it's more difficult for them to come back if they even can.
All right.
I want to see pictures
Well,
of this,
I'll,
Mike. Send them to me.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Enjoy. I do love a good daylily bunch. That's a fun thing to take care of. Now, the other things you can be doing with daylilies right now is quite simply almost anything. They've finished blooming, so you can certainly clean them up. There are plenty that will lose all of their leaves as soon as they dry up, just a little bit after they flower, but there are others that stay nice and green, so you just need to take out the flower stems. And I would take those out, because I'm not interested in producing seed. Now, if you are somebody who wants to breed daylilies, obviously you're going to let some of them go to seed, so you can just, in about 5 years, see what you got. That's about how long I think it takes from a seed to flower a daylily. But they are beautiful plants, and there's no reason not to enjoy them. I do like the reblooming ones. Probably the classic is Stella d'Oro. It's a very low-growing daylily that you'll see oftentimes in commercial plantings, because it is so reliable and small and will just bloom over and over. But there's some red stellas and some other things that are in that same group of reblooming daylilies that are worth your consideration too. I have been intrigued this week to take a look at some mulches. I had a question in my email last week about choosing mulch and how do you decide, and I was brought back to Ruth Stout. For those of you who are older than me, you'll remember her. She and her husband, I think his name's Fred, but I could be wrong about that, wrote several books about organic gardening back in the 50s, the 1950s. And the information is still absolutely true, if the writing is a little bit dated, perhaps. She still has a very good voice, though. She will tell you all about the different mulches, and she calls mulch gardening, as she refers to it, gardening everything in a mulch, on a mulch, with a mulch. She considers all of that to be how to garden without having an aching back, because there's not so much digging. This was in the time before we began to make stacked gardens, or the layered gardens where we let everything decompose in place like that. This was a little bit before that, and it was revolutionary to a lot of people to even consider that you might have an area, for example, under a tree where the roots stick out too much and you can't actually garden that well in there, but you can put mulch in and you can plant in the mulch. People had not thought of that as much. Plenty of people had done it because they just didn't rake the leaves out when they fell out of the tree, but no one had put it forward as a method of gardening until Ruth Stout in the 1950s. Interesting stuff. Let's see. I know I've got the text line over here. Let's see what's going on over there. Jason's in Pearl. He says, nematodes for insect control, ? I don't know. I can tell you that nematode control is, generally speaking, done with chitins. But if you'll send me another sentence or two, I might be able to help with that particular one. let me see if I can figure that one out. I have to think about that. So we're moving from mechanical pencils. By the way, Lance, they were patented in 1822.
A mechanical pencil patented in 1822. Huh.
Yep.
That's on
that's
back
right.
there.
Well, we're not the only ones that liked them.
Yeah, I'm a fan. Thank you very much for the inventor. I might have
We
to dig
appreciate
that
it.
one out.
It, like so many things, they take a bunch of people to get it done. Samson Morden and John Hawkins, 1822, the first patent for a refillable pencil that apparently was reliable. I think a lot of other people, whenever they say that in a patent conversation, they're always talking about all the people that submitted them and they blew up or didn't work, or something. But in this case, in 1879, Mr. Hoffman invented the push-button clutch mechanism, which is what we're so familiar with now.
It's got that little, it's got a little wheel in there.
Yep.
And it has the teeth on it. That's pretty high end for 1800s.
I'm telling you, these guys were thinking. People, one of the things that I realize now is, as I'm in the 21st century, is that all those things that you used to read and hear about, that time changing and all that stuff, I really do think that time, an hour felt longer then, perhaps because of many things, many constraints that were on people. But they did sit around and, learn how to whittle, learn how to make a pencil, learn how to undo that orange with the one piece of rind and the apple and all that sort of thing. So it's just fun. It's just fun to think about. Paula, that's a beautiful, beautiful dandelion. Just lovely.
Hey, I was visiting with a friend and his wife. They had a little cookout the other day and ran out to out from Pelahatchie, which is out from Lodabar, which is out from Crossroads. So that gives you an idea of where
I know exactly where that is.
Right. Beautiful area. I love it out there.
You're going to take me for a ride, right?
Yeah, man. It's pastoral and wonderful and ponds everywhere. But they had, cooked a good bit of food and we had a wonderful time. But I was visiting with the wife when I pulled up and she was out in the garden and, weeding and pulling and frustrated because she looked at me and she says, I can't get these tomatoes to do anything. They've been looking like this for a month. And, she has a bunch of pretty green ones about the size of a golf ball and maybe a little larger. And it's having the same issue in central Mississippi as a lot of folks seem to be having. Is there anything that, that we need to be paying attention to that's happening here? Because I keep hearing the same story.
Ripening has 3 or 4 qualities about it. One of them is quite simply the time involved. So sometimes we're eager for them to turn sooner than they would actually want to turn. And other times, of course, it feels like, especially if we have a whole lot of rain, the tomato will just swell up and even crack sometimes because it ripens so quickly. So there's the time that it takes that particular tomato to ripen. But then there's also the consistency of the water. Just like we talk about blossom end rot being initiated when the flowers actually are on the plant and in that very early formation of the fruit because they just can't take up enough water. We have the same problem in ripening. If there's not any water, or like everything else, if there's too much water, if the plants are sitting with their feet in water, the ripening process is affected. The other problem in ripening are stink bugs, and that's the one I put last because I hate to have anybody even think about it, but they are there. They are out here, and if you're seeing them in your plants, the way that they sting the tomato will affect its ripening and sometimes prevent it from ripening at all. So I would suggest watching for bugs, checking on the watering, and of course, if time has been the problem, you can always go back and look at how long that particular variety takes to ripen, because that information's available out there, in the Google machine. So you can find that out.
Well, that's a great answer, though, because I was trying to explain, but I didn't have near the expertise and professionalism that you just displayed.
Well, we hope
thank
not.
you.
I can't do your job.
Yes, I was like, I promise I'm going to ask this Saturday morning, and I will get you an answer.
I cannot do your job, so hopefully you can't do mine, or I'm out.
No, I can't even try to do your job. So
we have some really good info from our buddy. That's all of the upcoming events happening, so I'm going to try and get to some of that this morning. Let's see. Okay, Jason, I'm going to have to check this one out, and I'll try and find out for you, but I don't know either. He's driving, so we're going to talk a little bit later about some of that. Ooh, Ooh, lime and Monticello garlic. That is beautiful. Just gorgeous. We were having a conversation the other day about the many ways that we can eat garlic. You know, a lot of people say you should eat garlic. It's good for your health. I like it because it makes food taste better in many, many cases, but it is healthy. I'm not going to wear clothes around my neck. I'm not trying to ward off vampires right now. You know, that's not an issue for me. But I will tell you that roasted garlic is one of the most delicious things in the world, and garlic that you have just baked in oil is also really delicious. They have different applications, of course, when you get to the cooking part of it. But if you feel like you have too much garlic, not to worry. There's plenty you can do with it. And it looks to me like Lyman's going to have all the garlic he and the neighbors need. I think people are so funny. They talk about how, oh, you shouldn't have all that garlic because it's going to, you know, affect your breath. Just make sure everybody eats it. It'll be fine. It'll be just great. I think I should probably tell you that I'm not hearing music, but I expect to shortly. Am I correct? All right.
We will be back. We have a good question from Jim, but I'm going to wait until we get back from the other side of the break because I'm sure that you'll have some. It's a tomato question, you know.
Good.
As we have. Yeah,
That's wonderful. Thank you, sir. We'll be right back. Yes, indeed. All the harmonica fans in the world are here today. Lyman says that garlic came from only 3 shovels full. That's going to be that is going to be a neighborhood full of garlic. That's beautiful. And they're flawless, y'all. You need to look at them at supertalk.tv because this is what you're aiming for. These are beautiful. They're just perfectly harvested, and they're also flawless looking garlic. That's delightful. Fun. Ooh, how beautiful. One of my very favorite plants, Marty from Tupelo. We were just talking about these last week. The abelias that are in the courtyard at the radio station in Jackson are just showing out. And Marty from Tupelo has one that is magnificent, too. You know, I love that plant because it starts blooming now. It will bloom, you know, a little in June, carry on. But it really, really blooms out in July and even into August if you keep the water coming to it, if you don't happen to have any rain. She wants to know about watering and fertilizer. It's real simple. If you will prune it only enough to take whatever's dragging the ground, keep it off the ground, you know, do that in the early spring. That's all you really have to do in terms of pruning, in my experience with it. And the other thing is to fertilize it in early spring with something for flowering shrubs, something that is intended to produce more flowers. If you've got this one in some beautiful garden soil, a bed that's lovely, it's obviously going to have plenty of nitrogen from that as well as what it takes from its mulch. It does need a complete and balanced fertilizer, but you want it to be one that has slightly higher numbers in the phosphorus and potassium category as well as those trace elements. It's a butterfly magnet. It is a beautiful, beautiful plant. Thank you for sending it this morning.
We had a quick question, too, from Jim and Soso, and he was back to the tomato question. With the suckers, do you pull the suckers at the top, or do you just kind of wait and, you know, see in a new bush?
Now, people that have never grown tomatoes are going, you mean they have something else I didn't know about? They got blight, they got bugs, they got suckers? What is that? Well, a sucker is a vegetative form. If you've got your stem and you've got your side branches, it forms right there in the crotch of the side branch where it meets the stem. It's just another shoot. It's because the tomato can't help but grow. Okay, they're just, when they're happy, they're really happy. All right, what about suckers? Well, first of all, they give you another photosynthesizing surface. So you will have a little bit more action. You'll get more of the joy that you're supposed to have, unless it takes away from the tomatoes. And in that case, for example, what happens is you'll see that the plant's not doing anything different, but the suckers are about 2 feet tall shooting out of the middle of the plant. Those are the ones you want to take off, maybe even at 1 foot. You want to take those off. But some people say you cannot ever get them to root. They will never be okay. They will not make tomatoes. I know other people that root them every year and make tomatoes off of them. So I don't know of any botanical reason why they wouldn't grow and make flowers and make fruit, but I do know that they're trickier for a lot of folks. So I say leave them on the plant if you need. First of all, if your plant doesn't have a great deal of leaves on it and you need some shade for the fruit that is forming and ripening, they're really good for that. It's on the other hand, they will tell you if they're really shooting out at long lengths, they'll tell you that there's too much nitrogen in the situation. So go ahead and take them off and don't fertilize for a little while. So that's really what's happening with suckers. Oh, and if you want to root them, a lot of people just stick them in water to root. I'm not a big fan of that because I do think that at midsummer, your compost heap needs a little green in addition to the grass cuttings that you're going to put in it, and suckers make a good thing for that. But they're great if you need a little shade on the fruit, and they're really good if you need extra material to make more plants or compost.
Well, and Jim, he called back, and he had another question for you. I'm going to pipe him in right here.
All righty.
All right, Jim, you on.
Okay, good morning, Garden Mama. You
good morning,
good
Jim. Today. Thank you so much.
Look, these tomato plants, that's what I was asking him about the suckers. I left a few on there just to help it branch out and make shade and get more sunlight. But on my garlic, I've got it gathered. I've got it strung up. How long should I leave it hanging, and what do I do with it after I take it? When do I take it down, and how do I store it in the house afterward?
If you have long stems, you braid it, okay? And you do that as soon as it's dry enough to work with without sticking to your hands or sticking to itself. But if you want to just store them, if you're going to cut those stems off, you don't intend to make braids, all you're waiting for is for the material to dry. And at that point, the garlic's ready to be stored. It needs to be stored preferably in the dark, in somewhere that's not too hot. And I'm not in favor of putting it in the refrigerator, but a lot of people do. I don't think that has such a great effect on it. But a basket.
I got them hanging from a string right now, and they've been out here for about a month.
Well, they should be ready to use.
They're in the shade under the porch.
They should be ready to use by now.
Okay, well, I tried storing some in a little bag one time, like you get oranges in, a small bag, and they turn just as green as they can be and rotted.
Well, you'll see people do a lot of stuff, because we don't have the best drying conditions in this part of the world anyway. But people will put them into an old flat like you bought individual plants in, and just let them sit that way for ages or until you're ready to use them. But other folks will put them into a mesh bag and hang them up. But you got to let them get real dry before you do any of that.
Oh, okay.
So go mess with them. Go see how they are.
Enjoy your show.
Thank you for calling. Good to hear from you. I love having some garlic growers. By the way, if you are checking us out at SuperTalk.tv today, I hope you are. You will see that I am, in fact, not quite sitting in an oak tree, but I'm thinking about sitting in an oak tree. And that's really wonderful. It's a beautiful shot, Lance. Thanks for using it.
Oh, I love it, too. It just... It's got all the green growing on the tree, too.
Very garden-esque.
How does that, with an oak tree like that, I've always fascinated, because I keep that image of that beautiful place that you visited and did the remote there. But that, you get all that, it's not moss, but what is it that grows in those live oaks like that?
It's resurrection fern.
Ah, okay.
It's called resurrection fern because it comes up and is green every time it gets rained on, and then it disappears.
Okay.
It doesn't disappear, but it dies down and then it comes back.
It's so pretty. I've seen it all over, especially in the south of Mississippi.
Very much in wherever it has rained recently, you're more likely to see it, and it does proliferate on live oaks, and there certainly are more of those the closer to the coast we get. That's for sure. I'm going to tell you how I was a genius once. You ready for this?
You know I am.
When we were filming My Dog Skip in Canton, as happens a lot of the time, they bring the producers and, in this case, the whole team. The locations folks take you around and show you what's available, and they pick out where they're going to shoot these things. And they wanted to do, if you've seen the movie, it comes in with an opening shot that goes in over a live oak branch into a house, okay? So they wanted that. They saw it in the spring. It had been raining. It had resurrection fern on it, and they wanted it to have more in the summertime when I was there to do the work to make it green. I hooked up an oscillating sprinkler on very, very low, laid it up there, turned it on, and left it on for a week and it made just enough resurrection fern for the shot. It looked like springtime. And I mean, it's not that I'm brilliant, but I knew that all it would take is water, and I knew I wasn't going to go up there and sit with a hose, so I had to put something else to work for me. But it turned out beautifully, and when you see the shot, it does not look like there was a sprinkler on it. So
it's always amazing.
That.
I'm an old movie fan, as most people that listen weekly or daily know. That I like a lot of the older stuff because there's not a lot of CGI or people actually worked and built the set and had a lot of fun doing that.
They actually had to build that swamp.
Yeah, something happened there. They didn't just CGI. But the CGI stuff is really cool. But I love when you talk about your experience with the movie side and how much work went into keeping or making the set and the scene what was supposed to be and how it was supposed to look. And there's so many people involved with that, and you were one of those, and getting the plants and everything just right and the shots just right, and so that no one looks at it and goes, that ain't where, and I know that's not where you get that. But I love the older movies because there is that, there's so many people, there's a team, an army of folks.
And there's a consistency, and there are people who their entire job is to make sure that we don't get out of the time frame.
Yeah, you were explaining that to me once. Like, how hard is that to do? Like every little bitty thing that goes into
tricky.
Yeah, I bet it is. Yeah,
that's why we watch movies, to look for the mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I do.
We all do that.
You caught me.
We all do that. Beautiful flowers this morning. This is all. Who is this? Greg? Yeah, this is all Greg, and this is so good. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I wonder how did those purple romas taste? That was a pretty.
Ooh, yeah. That I wanted to know about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some gorgeous, gorgeous plants in here today.
But Lyman's on a roll today. I mean,
Lyman's
the garlic.
Really got it
he's
going
got the resurrection stuff in the trees.
Resurrection fern, and now he's got this ancient fern in the south.
Ocean Springs. Yeah, that's a beauty.
350 years old, they say.
Living in God's country, too, if you're in Ocean Springs.
I wouldn't doubt that. Paula sent some beautiful pictures from Baptist Hospital. It is a well-placed border bed. And when we talk about stepping up, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a low plant and then one that's slightly higher and then one that's slightly higher up than that, in that it's taller, but it's also on a slightly raised bed piece. And that's how come you can have sometimes it takes that to create drainage in a wide bed. This looks like it's about 10 feet wide and who knows how long. But with caladiums and begonias, and I'm going to say, I don't know what the third plant is, I won't guess. But at any rate, they're the way that they're stacked is it's not simply the height of the plant. It's also the fact that this back bed is raised just a little bit, and then the one behind that's raised just a little bit more, which is not quite terracing, but almost. And it really does make a difference in how things turn out. I like that.
I had a long conversation with Peaches Patrick the other day about that. It was just kind of picking his brain on, how do you make all that
He's
come
good.
together? Yeah, the layering and the, it was really a fun conversation because I was always under the assumption that you did it this way. It was kind of in a linear mindset and small up front, middle, and tall. And he was like, no. Kind of went into detail about, well, you want to kind of swerve it through and make different type of patterns, and so that the coverage. And I was like, okay, well, it made total sense, and that's why you bring people like you and Mark Peaches Patrick in, the experts.
Well, he's one of those people that, and I hope he's not listening because it will swell his head to hear me say this, but he's one of those people that can look at 4 plants and know how they will look in a container together in 3 months, and that's a real challenge. So if you can design something today, but it may look like a fruit bowl. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's going to be static, and you can't do that with containers. That's why he's so good at what he does.
Well, and like that picture that Paula sent with the Baptist Hospital curb, appeal there. It is beautiful, and that is what I always thought of it that way, kind of like one layer and then a line and a line and a line. And Mark said, you can do that, yeah, and you can also get real creative and get almost kind of swerve and meander through that same.
Well, it's like anything else.
Yeah.
It's like music. Once you know what a 3-part chord is, you can do a whole lot of things.
Right.
But you got to get a basic.
There you go.
Containers, for example, as well as flower arrangements, basically have something that goes up, something that goes down, and something that's in the middle. That is to say, something tall to draw your eye, something long to keep your attention, and the stuff in the middle really to kind of wow you a bit. So there's lots of different ways to look at it, but containers have have that other factor. You got to know what it's going to look like in 3 months.
Yeah. How big will that, like the hibiscus that I planted, and I put them in a nice squared, container. Probably, I could put a bag and a half of the LSU Tiger, dirt in there, and it
The
probably
grow mix?
the grow mix. I love that stuff.
It's good.
Yeah, I always think of you too. When
Thanks to our friends
Yeah.
in Brookhaven.
will that
Philip
hibiscus
Spark does that.
Yeah, will that hibiscus stay in that pot and grow okay, or will I need to move it into something?
No,
bigger later?
it's going to be fine.
Okay.
You'll be able to keep it in that for at least 2 years, but you will have to protect it in the winter
I
time.
will. Yeah, that's why I did it in that, and also the little wheeled
Yeah, we
deal
love
you can.
those.
Yeah, so I'm
we
not.
love
I think I'll be able to move them pretty well, and that's one of my goal was to really be able to do what you said, is don't leave them out there in the winter, protect them. But they'll be okay in that size pot for a couple of years, and
I would
as they
think
grow,
so.
I could pop them out and put them somewhere else, right?
I would think so. Betty in Hattiesburg has sent us a beautiful picture. I think it's a Zabrina, but I'm not sure. If you know what it is, Betty, let me know. Oh, my goodness. It's one of my very, very favorite love songs, y'all.
Yeah.
Stick around. We'll be back. So much to do, so much to consider, so much to think about. I love this question. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Who was this? This is, it's Greg. I thought that might be Greg. Your zinnias were so pretty, they caught me off guard. What's the most important aspects to consider when designing a greenhouse for year-round vegetables? The space has limited light. Okay, the first thing to consider is the limited light. If that's the only spot where you can put it, you need to design it with supplemental lighting. If the shade from the trees around it is what's causing the problem, you may not need as much supplemental lighting as if this is in a space that just happens to be shaded by, say, a building, across the street or something. So if you have less than half a day of sun on the site, the greenhouse is not going to operate well without supplemental lighting. But you can do that. You can install that just as you go. There's every sort of grow light fixture to do that with. Don't forget that the simplest is a 4-foot shop light with one cool white and one daylight bulb in it. That provides the complete spectrum, which is what you're trying to do for plants. But these days there are LED lights, arrays, there are all sorts of choices, but you're going to need some supplemental light. All of that implies a timer and obviously electricity or a solar panel that's going to run all of this for you. So you have to think about that. The other thing that you need to realize if you're going to grow vegetables year-round is that some of them are going to want to be grown in the ground in the greenhouse because you want to protect the top of the plant. I understand that, but there's some things that are never going to do as well in a big container as they will do in the soil itself. So you're going to want to build some beds inside of that greenhouse. What I'm thinking about really depends on what you want to grow, but when I think of things like persimmon trees, I'm not going to tell you to grow that in a container. It's a big plant. It can be grown indoors if you have a high enough ceiling. On the other hand, if you're growing figs and pineapple, guava, and satsumas, those are all plants that are going to be at the very most 8 or 9 feet tall, and you can grow those in big containers inside there, or you can grow them in a bed in that greenhouse. You want to consider how you're going to grow things when you put them there. Obviously, you've got to have access to water and, frankly, shade. I know you say that it's not in full sun, but in the summertime, you will be advantaged by having a little bit of shade, particularly, for example, we're just about ready to start vegetables for the fall garden. When we do that, it's really helpful to have just a little bit of shade to keep them from being quite as damaged as they might be in a traditional greenhouse. It would just be too hot. So you can have some shade for that. Ventilation, shade, and working on the light situation and beyond the water. Those are all things that once you set them up, they're there for the rest of time, and that greenhouse will give you great joy, and I guarantee you that you'll like it. I promise, once you get it set and going, you're going to love it. It's a fun environment, and it's also something that grows plants really, really well. You have more control. You can protect them. You can water them when they need water, not just when the sky opens up. But you can also shelter them a little bit more from the vagaries of the season. You can extend your seasons a little bit by using that cover. So I'm for it. I like it. Good ideas. Now, I got to tell you this. There's so many things in this world that are so funny. Today is Bikini Day. Been a long time since I even considered that myself. I'm sort of pale and worry about skin problems. But at any rate, Louis Réard in Paris did not mind all of this. 1946, I presume they were celebrating or they had run out of fabric or something. But the Bikini Atoll is what inspired the name of the bikini.
Okay.
Even though that at that time the U.S. military was in fact conducting atomic bomb tests on that place. I guess that's why it was in the news, why it was written about at that time. And he wanted to do something outrageous, and he named it the bikini. Do you know what separates the bikini from a two-piece bathing suit?
Not really.
You can see your navel.
Oh, okay. Well, did he invent the male Speedo too, or?
I don't think so.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, man,
I think that was the remainder of the people who had bigger ideas. But,
yeah, I was going to say I'm not going to be as big a fan of him if he invented the Speedo.
I don't believe he did. I think he was a women's designer and mostly for underwear, apparently. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. I think it is funny though that we have movies named after bikinis. I mean, it's just one of those phenomenons in the culture that has never lost its allure, as they say, for people. Coming up in our next hour today, I've got some pretty interesting information to you and some affirming information about why we want to encourage and how to encourage pollinators around our gardens, and some of the ways that things can actually pay off and be a beautiful, beautiful opportunity for all of us to get along. I've also got information, and I don't know why this is, but it hadn't happened before, so I thought I should mention it. The 3 top stories in horticulture, garden-related science all came to me today from Australian universities. I guess it's the middle of the winter there, and they're having meetings so they can read papers to each other. I don't know why that is, but here we are. So that's going to be fun. I have some really good questions in the Garden Mama group on Facebook. One from a person that has a question a lot of us have, and that is, how do we get rid of basket grass? If you don't know what basket grass is, consider yourself lucky. It's one of those things that grows flat on the surface, comes out around the time of dayflower, after spiderwort, but it's a very, very thin leaf, and it will run everywhere. It is, in fact, I think it's oplismus, but we know it as basket grass because it looks as if you could weave baskets out of it. It's very pretty. It does, however, cover the ground and run over everything, and it can be difficult to get rid of if you don't pull it out as you see it. It will get entrenched. And so the best way apparently is to pull it out, plant something else there immediately so that it can't start again, or pull it out and immediately suppress the area with something like solarization if you can possibly do that. Some people will say put a rock on top of it. I don't really agree with that because then you got to deal with having a rock in the middle of your flower bed, but it is one of those plants that you would like to stop. It is, while not technically invasive in most places, it is pesky and troublesome. So I would say take care of that and do that. Do that for yourself. You'll be glad that you did. You'll be real glad that you did, in fact. The other piece of that information about tomatoes I wanted to get to you this hour before I forget about it. When they split, they are not inedible. So I do advise that just like you go out and pick flowers right before it's going to rain, that you pick tomatoes if you know it's going to be raining for an entire day. Go ahead and pick. They will ripen or continue to ripen indoors. but you need to understand that split does not render it inedible. A lot of people say that they only make sauce out of the ones that split. Well, okay, but you're also getting a slightly watery tomato, because the reason it splits is because it took up water faster than it could handle it. So be aware of that. We'll answer some more questions from the Garden Mama group. Take your texts and all your phone calls here on the Garden Mama Show. Stick around. The questions you can ask. My goodness. There's questions that you don't think people should ask, but they do. That's the world of gardening, isn't it? This is a good question. How do you get a bulb that nobody else has, for example? Crocosmia lucifer. Now, if you've got crocosmia and you're trying to get rid of it, well, this is not for you. But lucifer is one that is not particularly aggressive. It has beautiful bright red flowers as opposed to the orange flowers of the more common one. And I'm going to say that unless you run into the bulbs in a rack someplace, that's something that you probably need to get either at a plant swap or, frankly, order it. And if you have a choice, if you get somewhere and there's a bunch of crocosmias, make sure that you're getting the one that you want, because lucifer is a very specific named variety because of that color. When is a good time to move a Peggy Martin, a rose? Well, ideally winter, but we don't always get a chance to do that in winter. So I probably ought to put together some tips on if you got to move it now kind of thing. It's really a matter of preparing the soil, pruning the plant that you're moving, and then making sure that you keep water coming to it on a regular basis, even using something, either a manure tea, a compost tea, worm castings tea, something that's going to help those roots really get going. Root stimulator's okay, but it's not as good as the others. And it's just something else to consider. So those are some questions coming in the Garden Mama group today on Facebook. We don't really bring in more people because the people that are there tend to bring in people, but we're working on that. We'll get that to you another day. What are your favorite red, white, and blue flowers? That's another really good question. We'll talk about that this morning. Maybe you've got some suggestions for me. You can send them in on the text line. Corinne's in Jackson. She heard that I love this. It's time to plant pumpkin seeds. And in case you didn't know that, it's time, like now, today, if you want them for Halloween. So she says that she's heard to make a hill of soil and to plant 3 seeds in each mound and then later choose the best seedling. Do I agree with that? Full sun, I guess, yes. You definitely need full sun for pumpkins. The other thing that you absolutely need for pumpkins is a reservoir. And the easiest way to make one of those would be if you had one of the big coffee cans that are barely around anywhere anymore. So I'm going to suggest a 1-gallon jug. You poke some holes around the base of it and keep the cap on it so you can keep it closed up. Bury that halfway into the soil next to where you're building the hill. You want it to be able to water almost constantly. You want to be able to come along and just put water and fertilizer into that reservoir so that it goes directly to that pumpkin. So yeah, you need a space. Ideally, you need a space that's 6 by 6, something like that, because this is so much vinage. But as I've said before, you oftentimes will see the pumpkin planted in the flower bed and the vine just trailing across the lawn, which is not, I don't have any problem with that. It makes it hard to mow the lawn. But if you're willing to do that, then that's perfectly easy. 3 seeds, I'm probably going to plant 5. And the reason I'm going to do that is just because they may not all come up. Don't crowd them together, but put them around the top of that hill, and then you're going to leave 2 and let one go one direction, one go the other. Varieties, there's a lot of varieties of pumpkins, and they will all grow well here, even if they have names like Connecticut something or another. There's some pretty prosaically named pumpkins. But it does depend. Read your labels, read your seed packs, because some take 120 days, some take 90 days. You want one that's going to fit into the potential for the time that you're doing it. That's really all I would have to say about that. Roma tomatoes don't ripen on the windowsill like other tomatoes. Well, Andy, I have a suggestion for you. Get a brown paper sack and put them in it. believe it or not, that's generally speaking what encourages them. Put them under the sink, for example, or in a closet, somewhere in your house. Don't ignore them entirely, but let them alone for about a week and then come back and see if some of the color hasn't developed. That usually works out pretty well. Lance, I got to tell you, I wanted to celebrate this particular day that's happening today, but it turns out I'm not celebrating the right thing.
Okay.
There was a big cereal and grain movement in the United States in the very early 19th, late 19th, early 20th century. Kellogg's, they got into it, all those people. Well, Reverend Graham, this is not, I don't believe this is Billy Graham's relative, but it doesn't tell me it isn't, so if you want, I just don't know, but I don't believe Billy Graham was a Presbyterian, and this Reverend was one of those people that believed that vegetarian eating lifestyle was the only way to go, and that basically if you were having any fun around food at all, there was something morally wrong with you. Now, that's a judgment call that I'm making, but I'm telling you, there were a bunch of those folks that wanted you to be healthy, but only if you were also miserable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and enjoy anything.
No. Spas that were not spas like we know today. Spas where they would put you in solutions of things to do stuff to your body that apparently never worked, or we'd still be doing it. But at any rate, the Reverend believed that a bland vegetarian diet based on graham flour, and this is what I thought was so interesting. I didn't realize that graham flour is coarsely ground whole wheat. That's all that is.
Really? Okay.
Well, that tells you how bland that was going to taste.
Yeah, wheat, just straight up.
He
Not much
believed
to it.
that it could promote spiritual purity, and shall we say that your lesser urges would be suppressed.
Yeah, as long as you're very Spartan in this
Very
world,
Spartan.
you're good.
Somebody, fortunately, along the way took those things, put a little honey in, did this and that to them, some cinnamon, and we have graham crackers that I enjoy very much today.
Yeah.
But you would not have gotten anybody to eat this original graham cracker, even as a s'more with a marshmallow on it, because it was, well, first of all, that probably would have been sinful considered in his church. But now we do them a little bit differently. We started in like the 1950s to begin to use that coarse graham flour and turn it into things like, pie crusts and delicious sweet treats. So it's Graham Cracker Day, and how would we know that if we didn't have an opportunity?
Well, and you always have that shredded wheat you can pull out, the old Post brand shredded wheat with nothing on it. It's just, you've got to dial it up real good for it to have any flavor.
Yeah.
The milk is the flavor to that deal. But they eventually came out with a frosted kind.
In my, which I still don't like, but in my most serious and most limited food eras, and I know you don't think I eat anything now, so we'll have that conversation another day. But in my most limited, most restricted food times, I was definitely that person. I was, don't put anything else on there.
Right. Just go straight and bland and no flavor and no fun.
Exactly. No fun, no flavor. But anyway, I am going to pull the wool over the Reverend's eyes and tell you that if they bring me a graham cracker without any goodness in it, I'm done. There's no question.
Well, that Seinfeld cereal movie is really good. What is it called? Unfrosted.
I was so surprised that I thought it was funny, and I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one, too.
Very surprised.
Yeah, and it actually had some interesting historical context in there, kind of thrown around comedically. But
Yes.
I found that movie to
For
be
those of
really...
y'all, it's the story of the invention of Pop-Tarts.
Yes.
And what essentially, according to this story, it was basically just another way to make profit,
Well,
there's a certain joy in having a tart, but
Well, they were all everybody was trying to figure
They were
out
all trying
how
to
we
do
could do
one.
something other than cereal.
Yes.
And so the Pop-Tart, the pastry, the stuffed
Yes.
pastry, and it was one of the funny things is like, all right, so we've got all these flavors like strawberry, grape, and there was another couple,
Oh,
and Jerry
gosh.
Seinfeld says it's all the same flavor. We just
Different
name
color.
it something
Yeah,
different.
Name it something different. Well, I'm going to tell you that for those of you who like Amy Schumer and for those of you who don't,
Oh, she was something
you
in
need
that
to
one.
watch her portray Marjorie Post.
Mm-hmm.
She is hysterically funny and perfectly on point for everything from the Jackie Kennedy pillbox hat to the suits to the, she was just delightful. And of course, she did not win the day. Kellogg's ended up with the Pop-Tart, but she made a good case.
Well, and you have McCarthy in there too. She's hilarious.
Yeah, she's hilarious.
And Max Greenfield is in it also. He is
so
Rick
funny.
Ludwig. He always plays that kind of quirky, very neurotic.
Extremely quirky in this one.
And he's awesome. James Marsden in it is Jack LaLanne. He's so funny.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
The cast is absolutely
It's a
top
great
notch.
cast. It's
And
a
then don't
fun
forget
movie.
about Edsel Kellogg III, and that's Jim Gaffigan. He
Yeah.
was Amy Schumer's opposite, as she's
It is-
Marjorie Post.
He was absolutely brilliant in this, and some of the fun really is that ensemble acting always produces a funnier show.
Yeah.
And they played off of each other.
Well,
very,
and I love the way
very
they
well.
brought the children in, the kids, and that was like, hey, we don't know anything. Let's bring these little rugrats in.
That's
They're
right.
digging around in the
So-
garbage, figuring everything out. So,
And they truly did.
scavengers.
July is cacti month. I did not know that, but I can see why it would be.
Perfect conditions.
Perfect conditions for all of that. For those of you who are traveling in the world where large cacti are, don't forget we have a native one in the southeast, and that's prickly pear. It's a beautiful cactus, and in fact, this is when they begin. You're driving along, you might be in the Delta in Mississippi, for example, and you ride along and you realize there's this cactus as big as the house behind it, and it literally has paddles for hands. The cactus is fully paddles, and the flowers are yellow, and you want to stop and go look at them. It's probably okay to do that. I always tell you, make sure you know where you're tromping into, but most of the time those cactus plants are so close to the road that no one's going to complain if you go over to look at it, and they are beautiful. They're not easy to grow, but they're not impossible either. If you like them, you should grow them, because it is a native plant. It's like it belongs to me in the same planting area, and I'm not a designer, but it belongs in the same planting area with Adam's needle, because to me the petals of the cactus and the spikes of Adam's needle yucca are just really beautiful together, and they're very bold and make a very strong statement. So if you're looking to draw attention, it's a good pair of plants to do it with, no question about
My
it.
first time to Mexico went down like with a church mission group, and I think it was 19, and we went out and built this building. We were actually putting the roof on it from the year before, and the wind was like 50 miles an hour all the time, and you're in this desert kind of setting, and you're just covered with this silt all the time. But at the end of the week of doing that, they put together a meal for us, and everything was harvested locally. It was like fish out of the lagoon and goat that they had barbecued in the ground in tinfoil. Just all they did was remove the innards, and it still had its eyes. That thing would be eyeballing you while you were eating it. And it was delicious.
understand.
But the cactus, and they had de-spined it and cut it very much like a julienne green bean. And it was very good. I was surprised. I really didn't know what I was getting into, but I was kind of blown away at cactus cooked the right way. Yeah.
It's a very, very succulent and almost sweet vegetable. It just has a quality to it that you would not expect.
Man, it worked really well with that greasy, awesome goat, and there was some kind of little fish stew or something. It was really good, but I'd never had it since then, and I've always wondered if anyone here in the States actually prepares cactus that way.
People do that, absolutely. There's no question, but there's somebody that eats just about everything in our part
Apparently,
of the
you
world.
can. You just
No
got to
question.
get those points off of it. It'd be like trying to eat a porcupine without.
Well, and it's one of those things that when it shows up in a basket, for example, at a cooking competition, the question is, how long am I going to have to spend on this?
Yeah, what
And
all
it's
do I have to
usually
do?
quite what's like having to shuck oysters, before you can cook them. You're going to be there a while. I was real happy. Peaches sent us some Natural Science Museum information going on, and also a landscape checklist from our friends at the Cooperative Extension. I was really appreciating that one of the tips is watch for garden pests and diseases. That's a good thing. That's the first step in integrated pest management, in case you didn't happen to already know that. But the thing about integrated pest management is that we do it every day. We've just put together this discipline to explain it. And when people start to ask me questions like, okay, you used to say organic, now you say sustainable, what's it? It's all a matter of conscious gardening. And it's really a matter of gardening with the forces that are in the yard as opposed to against most of them. And for that reason, I think it's important for us to talk about integrated pest management very often, really as often as possible. If we are monitoring, if we are watching for them, as the note from the Extension Service says, paying attention to who's out there, and as I said, if you've got a problem, look around and see who's there. Sometimes it's the stink bugs, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a different issue, but if it is a bug, you need to know about that too. The cultivating methods, though, I wanted to tell you, we always talk about leaving that patch for the pollinators out in the field, and also so that the beneficial insects have somewhere to be around your garden. We give it that. Well, we now have research from Western Australia's biggest university, Curtin. They are studying the preservation of native strips in avocado orchards, and the yields are better, the pests are fewer, and quite frankly, what could be wrong with that? Absolutely nothing. This whole business of encouraging botanical diversity, of course, is what I've talked to you about for so long, keeping the insects on your GPS so they know where you are, so that then when the avocados need pollinating, maybe there's not enough blossoms, for everything, but there are pollinators to move the pollen if they have somewhere to live, because they wouldn't necessarily just be attracted to those flowers on the avocados. Insect communities and avocado orchards that are adjacent to what they call native remnant vegetation, that is to say, just the things that come up and grow. Think goldenrod for us, think ageratums, think ironweed, those kinds of things. These were visited more than twice as many times as pristine field areas. Now, come on. You come by twice as often, you're probably going to pollinate at least as much, if not more, than you could have before, and you will have more pollinators because there's more food sources for them. So I really appreciate the folks at Curtin making it easy for me to tell you it makes sense to monitor, it makes sense to pay attention, it makes sense to control as little as necessary. These are all wonderful bits and pieces of integrated pest management. We will be right back.
I'm a friend.
Do love a good laugh, huh?
Love it.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. Well, I don't know where the picture is. I've got a question to identify a small lily, but I don't have it. I'm sorry. You'll have to send the picture again because it didn't get to me. But I'm going to guess that it is one of the rain lilies, because small pink lilies at this time of the year tend to be, I think there's the Frantes, but they're sometimes called hurricane lilies, and they're sometimes called rain lilies. It just depends on which one. So they're nice, though. They're beautiful little flowers, and one that, if it rains a whole lot, like as it did this year, for example, I have some things like that pop up that don't come up every year. It takes a lot of rain to get them to move. So I like that a lot. Talking about things about the whole crocosmia question, as soon as I said that out loud, I got immediately two texts and one email from somebody else who's different people saying to me, don't tell anybody to plant those things, they're horrible. Well, they're not horrible at all. They're actually quite popular in many places, but they do tend to rip through the bed. So if you can give them their own space, it's like cashmere bouquet. You might want to plant those two things together, cashmere bouquet and crocosmia, in an isolated part of your garden and let them duke it out, because they are both pretty aggressive. And they are beautiful, though, and they're both pretty decent cut flowers, and something that you might want to consider just having, because you don't have to do anything to it except cut it down after it finishes. So something to think about. Just a little bit different attitude maybe on my part. I have been questioned also this week about taking care of live oak trees, and it was before we even had this beautiful one in my background today. Live oaks are no different than other oaks, except that they can have a longer life, and so therefore, because of the way their branches form, sometimes those branches at the lower part, they are a more spreading oak tree than other varieties, other species, other cultivars rather, in that group. So you probably do have to consider as much the space. It's like a catalpa tree. You've got to have a lot of space for a tree that can be as big as this thing is. But you also have to look as you go through the younger part of that tree how you're pruning it. Because if you're not pruning those younger, lower branches to strengthen them, you miss out on some of the most beautiful part of that tree. I feel the same way about Magnolia grandiflora. I really love the wide reach of those, and the big branches that they have. But I recognize that if you don't do that when it's getting pruned, you don't end up with those later on. You end up with weaker and, frankly, not as supportive branches. You'll see sometimes people go in and cut off all the lower branches of something like a live oak. It not only is dangerous in terms of weakening the tree, but it's so aesthetically unattractive. Speaking of unattractive, we've been looking at some really very, very lovely trees, but the question is, can you deadhead crepe myrtles? There's a lot of them this year that have bloomed out very, very quickly. And I think I can't remember where I was exactly, but somebody said, I have one of those pole pruners, that you can extend the pole up. And he wanted to take off the flowers so he would get more. That's great. If you can still reach those, that's a wonderful thing to do. But they will make more flowers without that process in most of the case, especially the more modern varieties. I wish I could tell you what I'm looking at. Sure is a cute cat, but I have no idea what the story is. Oh, my goodness.
He's in a good spot. Whenever you see the carpet little tower, that's usually a good
They
perch
usually
for
like
him.
to be. They usually like to be there. I just want to know what he's looking at.
Yeah, something down there
Is
on
he
the
looking
ground.
at me? What's he looking at?
A little
I don't
mouse,
mean to be
maybe.
mean. I just think it's funny. Oh, my goodness. Well, some other things that are going on in our world today, and I hesitate to say this because now we'll start talking about food that we really wish we could eat as opposed to graham crackers. Today is National Apple Turnover Day, and I'm ready to argue with you because I think apples are the best ones. There are other people that have other favorites, cherry or whatever other turnovers, but apple turnovers to me set the bar.
Oh yeah, my memo they called them tarts. And she had, she diced the apples and made the syrup and had the dough. And I guess it was mostly biscuit dough back then, and she'd just open it up, make a little, big circle, pour all the stuff in, and then use her fingernails, to seam it up. And, man, I ate those things. And
Did she fry them or bake them?
She fried them, yeah. She fried them. Yeah.
Well, see, fried pies are fried is different. That's more like empanada world, but I like them.
Well, hers were soft though. She didn't cook them until they got crunchy.
Oh, okay.
She let them just get just enough to where they would kind of cure up and hold together, and you would eat those things and be like, "Oh, where?" And then she'd just keep bringing them one after another. You want another one, bud? Yes, ma'am. Give me another one.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please. There's a place in North Mississippi though that makes them just like she did, and when I lived up there in Oxford, I had a little ritual where I'd go by about once a month and buy about 5 of them, And,
dangerous.
A lady from out in the county had made them, and I think she was fairly elderly. And I said, I need to get to know her. And then COVID hit, and
then you need to learn how to make.
That's what I was. That was one of the ones I never really. Mama never taught me that one. I wish I would have. Learned the skill set on the tart because it is it's
that's
wonderful.
me and thin dumplings. People who like puffy dumplings that's not my world. I grew up with the thin kind, and it's hard to make. But then I can't make pie crust either, so I'm useless.
She was the best dumpling maker ever. We've always talked about that over the years. Mom, my sister, my dad. It's just how amazing those dumplings were, and she would always use the dark meat chicken for the dumplings and a biscuit dough, and she didn't have them real
whole
thick.
Other world.
Yeah,
that's another festival we don't have. We could have the chicken and dumplings festival.
I'm in. Yeah,
there's at least 15 or 20 different sorts, But I have a question for you. Do you have nightmares? I think everybody has nightmares at some point in their life. I didn't realize there were people who have nightmares all the time. The folks at Frontiers Institute of Technology in Melbourne are letting us know that, unlike apple turnovers, cheese can actually give you nightmares. I had no idea. They surveyed 1,000 students, and they discovered that a certain percentage of them don't even know it, but they are, in fact, lactose intolerant. That is to say, they can't digest cheese. So the midnight it may not be the beer. It may be the cheese at midnight for these college students that are causing them to have bad dreams. Obviously, if you just quit eating the cheese, but who's going to not eat pizza after the bar closes? I mean, come on. You know? I can remember doing that. I would do it today if I was awake at that hour. A different question entirely. Why would you study this, though? I'm so amazed at the things that we study. Somebody somewhere was disturbed about it enough that they felt like they needed to know. You know, they needed to have an answer to something. Pretty funny.
We got Paula sending biscuits.
Oh,
Flaky, beautiful biscuits,
killing me.
too.
I'm telling you.
She says, speaking of food, I finally learned how to make biscuits. My neighbor taught me.
Well, we appreciate her neighbor.
Good work, neighbor.
Oh, my goodness. Lunamoth pupae. That's pretty, too. Wow. That's really something. There's a video going around of the sped-up process of the formation of the chrysalis, and from when the monarch pupae begins to do that. It's amazing to me. That's a mighty good-looking biscuit, Paula.
Yeah.
I need to see that Mayhaw jelly. I'm ready.
Exactly.
I'm ready. Sun Gold cherry tomatoes produce so many tomatoes. Yes, how often, we talked about this before, about fertilizing the baby pumpkins that are growing up a trellis. Really, the main thing is to have that reservoir with it, because you need them to have water and fertilizer every single day to get the most out of those pumpkins, even the little ones on a trellis. You may not mix full strength fertilizer after a few weeks, but you definitely need to kick them off with it. I like that. Sun Gold cherry tomatoes are also one on my list, in part because they do make branches of tomatoes as fruits as long as your arm. I mean, they're magnificent. But I love this. This is such a great tip. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Cut them in half and dehydrate them, skin side down for about 15 hours, and they become little crispy nuggets like that you put in salads and stuff forever after that. Store in the refrigerator. Make them into a powder. Thicken stuff with it. I love that. It's such a great idea. Just a great idea. I've never had enough to do that, but I think it certainly should happen. Yes. Okay. Yes, let me just tell you, Ray in Gluckstadt, you need to check with the folks at the Tupelo Farmers Depot. The farmers market in Tupelo is where Velma was, and they're there. You won't have any problem finding them. Thank you for asking. I just had some of their honey yesterday. It was great. See, the things we know. The things we know. That's fun. Ooh, basket grass. Yeah, this is one of those things where if you use one of the corn gluten products, for example, to try and suppress basket grass or any other creeping, crawling thing in your flower bed, you might use that thinking, well, this is less toxic, and it is, than Roundup or something like that, but it's also going to be just as broad spectrum. That is to say, anything that it gets on, it's going to do something too. So I'm going to suggest that this is where you need to learn how to paint. And that is to say, if you're using spruce, if you're using another corn gluten product, or if you're using a Roundup or anything else, when you apply it just to the plant that you want to control, it doesn't get on the other things like spray drift can do. So don't spray, paint. And I think you'll find you have a much better response from your plants.
What is the name of the beautiful red flower that looks like a big ball of red meat? Making me hungry. What is this? Does it taste like strawberry meat or something? What is that?
That is a celosia. It's we call it brain, but it's because of the way that it looks like. But it's just one of those. You'll see some that are this sort. You'll see some that are plumed, And it's a wonderful flower for the summertime. It's one that we can plant 3 or 4 times during the summer and have flowers all the way till October.
It's absolutely beautiful. I don't know if I've ever seen one of those in person. How big is
in
that
this
head on
color,
that thing?
usually you'll see purple ones,
Okay.
but you won't see the salmon color. That's one reason why I like this one.
It's so pretty.
They're big at least as big as a softball.
Okay, it looked like about a softball. Yeah.
Sometimes a little bit bigger. Just depends on the plant too. I mean, if the plant's got 15 on it, they're going to be a little smaller. So, but talk about a great cut flower. I mean, you can keep that one for days, if not weeks, in just a vase that you change the water out of every now and then.
And what was the name of that again?
Celosia. Celosia.
Yeah, thank you.
Certainly. This is not a spelling contest, but if you don't know how to spell it, it can be very distressing.
Right.
Oh, my goodness. Things that are different one place from the other. I'm starting an ongoing process of what one product does that another one doesn't do. That's something we've been using, for example, chlorothalonil fungicide in this country forever. And we've always had differences in the products that we use than the ones that are approved by the EU. We've had quite a few changes in our world because of them, and they've made some restrictions that we don't agree with. But University in Sydney is letting us know that they also use chlorothalonil as well as the Americans do, but it's a fungicide, and so the effect that they're concerned about is that it increases the likelihood that beneficial insects, a number of other things, will be affected by it in ways that we did not understand previously. So it's something to think about. We'll talk about fungicides and one thing and another over the next few weeks as I explore some of these things. But please don't go anywhere. We're going to talk a little bit more here on the Garden Mama Show.
Holy little bat-faced girl, all alone.
Ah, Mrs.
There she
Stills.
sits, a lofty bird, strangest
That's a good one.
It's a good one. It's a good one. The question is always, how did they begin? How do you put together a band that turns out to be that remarkable?
Oh yeah.
And apparently it was almost happenstance. Stephen Stills met David Crosby, and they're hanging out at Joni Mitchell's house, and the next thing you know, her boyfriend Graham Nash comes over, and well, they start singing.
What a
Life
great
should
show.
be so easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life should be so easy.
Stephen Stills, Neil Young, Jim Messina. I mean,
All of that.
all the
Just
goodies.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant. Oh my goodness. I know that this is the week that everybody's going, okay, when can I plant? What can I plant? And now is the time really to begin the process of that poorly misnamed fall garden. This is the garden that you're going to harvest in the fall, so you have to plant it in the summer. If you've never done this before and you always think, I hear about those fall tomatoes, but ... There's one thing you need to do with your tomato plants right now, and that's keep the vines in good health. If you can do that, you will have plants that we're going to make some beautiful, beautiful tomatoes for you much sooner than anybody else, because we're also planting tomato plants again at this point. If your plants sadly went to blight or got torn up by stink bugs or any other, insect or disease, or frankly, if you just didn't like the way they turned out. Some folks said that everything was kind of watery. The plants grew, but they didn't do well because it was so wet. Now's the time to start over. And as we speak, there are people in greenhouses across the southeast planting broccoli and tomatoes and everything else, getting ready for you to be able to transplant them into your garden later in July or even into August, of course, is when we think about so much more of that work. But if you want that one, if you want your, sun gold, if you want Cherokee purple, if you've got some other tomato that you want, get your seeds and plant them now. Same is true if you're not content with the broccoli that you will find, for example, in the 6-pack at the garden center in about 8 weeks. If you're not happy with that, go ahead and get you some broccoli seeds. You might want to grow a different one or a smaller one that's intended for a container. All of those things can be done now, and I want to encourage you to do that. There are a couple of things to consider when putting in the fall garden. One of them really is quite simply the simplest part of all is to realize that you're going to have to protect those little seedlings. You'll grow them and then you'll plant them, and it's probably going to be torturously hot, maybe even thundery, lots of storms and stuff. You never can tell about the end of the season. So give yourself that opportunity to offer them a little bit of protection in one form or another. I think you'll be glad you did.
Well, and I greatly appreciate Randy. Thank you so much, Randy in Starkville, for sending us and I have the picture up now, but hail destroyed our garden a while back, and we replanted about 4 weeks ago. A little behind, but I am ready for the first ripe tomato. He's even got the white bread.
He's ready. He's got the knife out there and all.
Salt and pepper and everything. He's just waiting. So I'm with you, brother. I wish you the best on that.
You're going to be a little toasty by the time it gets right. But the good news is that it will. And I got to say, there are markets in every town, every county, every parish, everywhere that you go right now. You're going to find people with tomatoes that are able to happily sell them to you, and sometimes varieties that you would not have run into. I saw a table yesterday with 3 different kinds of yellow tomatoes on it. I'm not the world's biggest yellow tomato fan, but if you got 3 different kinds, I'm certainly going to ask you which one is the sweetest, which one has a salty taste. Tell me about them, because you're in the midst of growing that many. So that's kind of fun. Randy, we wish you all the best. It won't be long. It won't be long.
Yeah, keep that appetite ready.
Beautiful monstera. That's a beautiful plant, Paula. Thank you. Yes, and that's the reason why the little bit of shade and all of this water is why the plant not only looks beautiful, but it also doesn't have any burned leaves. Sometimes when we put split leaf philodendron or monstera or even just some of the bigger elephant ears, the alocasias, when we put those into an area that's very sunny, yeah, they grow great, but the first time that they get a little too hot, you end up with that browning on the tips, and that's so unattractive. I will tell you that I'm famous for just taking a pair of scissors and cutting it back into that nice point that it had before. Professionals do this all the time. That's why their garden might look a little better than yours sometimes. Something to think about anyway. But I do love that plant, and I like that has it in such a nice protected area, because that means it doesn't, if there should be a hailstorm like there was in Starkville, it's not likely to get too damaged. That's
I haven't seen one as
really
pretty as that. That was beautiful.
Really beautiful. She's got the best specimen, today's best specimen. Love that. I am that tickles me. I'm glad to see it. Very glad that you've got that going on. It's so pretty. We don't often think about them as display plants or as things to feature, because they're so commonly part of the tropical vibe that we put into a patio or something like that. But in this case, this is one that's permanently placed in and it's just going to have that wonderful presence all the time. I do love that. I think that's really smart. Really, really smart. Oh, and finally today, my friends, are left-handers really more creative? I know y'all all think you are. Been hearing this all my life. I'm the kid that started out writing with my left hand, and because I went to elementary school in the 50s, they made me sit on my left hand and learn to write with my right. Now, according to a lot of people, that's why my brain works or doesn't work like it does, because of that fundamental change. However, Cornell University, not Australia, these are our folks in upstate New York, they have done the review. They've gone in and crunched the numbers from all the other studies, and what they have found is that more than a century of research does not mean that you lefties are more creative. Unfortunately, they could find no consistent advantage. Now, there are plenty of people that are going to disagree with this, and I look forward to your emails. I'll appreciate them. But lefties, one of the things is that left-handedness is rare, and so is creative genius. But just because A happens and B happens does not mean that C happens. It's got to go back to basic logic for that one. But it's also true that sometimes the overrepresentation of left-handed people in art gets overplayed because we're looking for a reason why this is a difference. It's just a difference. It's one of those things that can be accentuated or can actually be to nobody's mind at all. As far as I know, no one has studied us who had to sit on one hand and learn to write with the other, but I will volunteer for that if anybody would like. Oh, my goodness. Thank you very much, Nathan in Smith County. It was great hearing y'all this morning. He says, I've been pretty busy and haven't been able to text, but I hope you and Lance had a great 4th. I can speak from my end of the camera. Yes, I did. I'm sure you did, too.
I took it easy. I had to come in and work a little bit, and then laid low, ate good, and slept good. So
well, that's all very, very positive.
Watched a lot of fireworks too until I gave up. I was like, all right, I'm done.
It's not that there aren't too many of them, but oh my goodness, there's so much. There's a lot.
Impressive
to keep up
allotment.
with.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of different choices and different ways to watch too. This will be a big week for me. I've got to get started planting a few beans and things for the fall garden. I hope you will too. Come back next week. We'll be back. This is the Garden Mama Show.